Hello, and welcome to our November edition of GlobalView. For those of you who are new to Frontier View, we're part of FiscalNote's Geopolitical and Market Intelligence business unit. At Frontier View, we work as a trusted partner with over 300 multinationals, supporting senior executives such as VPs of regions, CFOs, and strategy leads. Our focus is on powering strategic planning, market monitoring, and international growth. And for that, we have dedicated research practices for North America, LATAM, EMEA, Asia Pacific, global economics, and healthcare. We work with clients across consumer goods, healthcare, B2B, and the tech sector. So we hear a lot from companies about their plans, a lot about budgeting, and a lot of questions as they're dealing with geopolitical issues. And of course, those are all high on the agenda in Latin America. So today I'm joined by Mariana Zepeda, who leads our Latin research team. Welcome, Mariana. Thank you so much for joining us. And she'll give us a sense of what are some of the issues that are top of mind for executives across Latin America. How are they thinking about growth opportunities and also political risk, of which there's always plenty in that region. And we'll take us through some of the expectations across LATAM. But first, Mariana, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what is dominating the planning cycle for LATAM executives right now. What are their main concerns and issues they're focusing on?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me, Martina. It's fantastic to get to be a part of this conversation. So, to give you a sense of what is top of mind for our executives working in LATAM right now, I would say, and you can see here in some recent polling that we did at a LATAM level event, most of the executives we talked to are sort of concerned about the demand story. Over the past couple of years, it's been difficult, I think, across the world, right? But particularly in LATAM, to really figure out what demand is going to look like, to really have sound demand forecasting. So I think it's thankfully, the region has surprised to the upside in the past couple of years. What we've been doing is having to sort of revise our growth expectations upward, but I think that's made planning just a little bit more difficult. So as we enter 2024, I think that question is still very much top of mind. What will demand look like next year? Certainly, the political uncertainty element as well is always top of mind for executives. The region is definitely never boring.
Yeah, and just a clarifying question, Mariana. Do most Latin executives feel like they did relatively okay with performance targets so far this year? Maybe surprised a little bit on the upside, a little bit like growth did. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, that is fair to say. I think that's certainly been the story across most of the companies we talk to is upside surprise. Yeah.
Okay, so I see how that raises questions about what about next year, of course, especially if targets are higher. So could we take a look at just overall growth dynamics across the region, which markets are likely to perform the best next year, and how that's playing into maybe investment plans as well?
Absolutely. So, what I'm showing here in this next slide is our GDP expectations for 2023 and 2024. It's sort of an interesting mix in LATAM next year. We see both Brazil and Mexico actually decelerating just a little bit, and so that's going to always dominate, right, the top line GDP figure for Latin America because these are by far the two largest markets. And we see a little bit of deceleration in Mexico stemming from potential deceleration in the US. And then in Brazil, having more to do with industry dynamics and outperformance in the agriculture sector this year. So because those two markets are growing a little bit slower next year, that's pushed down the regional average. However, if you look at some of the slightly smaller markets, a lot of them are going to be performing better in 2024. We have Colombia, for instance, having faced quite a challenging 2023, largely to do with the fact that inflation has been stickier in Colombia more than anywhere else in the region. We're still seeing double-digit inflation, but as that slows down into next year, we definitely see huge growth opportunities. And then the political situation in Peru has also led the country to a pretty unexpectedly slow year from a growth standpoint. So again, that leaves the opportunity open for more growth in 2024 now that political situation's a little bit more stable. In the Southern Cone, 2023 was particularly challenging. We saw recessions in Argentina and in Chile, and then their paths sort of diverged from there. Argentina is going to remain in a recession into next year. And then we will see Chile really emerge from its 2023 recession into 2024 as the economic situation in the country really stabilizes.
Part of this is about the reshoring question that I think is coming up a fair amount in the context of global supply chains. Would you say that even if its growth is not accelerating next year, Mexico will continue to attract investment because of its position as an entry point into the US market and the diversification option as well? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that is absolutely a fair statement. We've forecasted 7% growth in investment in Mexico this year, which is enormous, and we expect investment to continue to grow into next year. So while in this particular situation, the sort of exports and consumer story are weighing more on overall GDP, we are still very optimistic about the investment story, and we continue to see record levels of investment making it into the country.
Got it, yeah. And then there's the politics, right? Because frankly, probably not just in LATAM, but certainly in this region, that has a huge role to play. And you mentioned Argentina. Of course, yesterday was the second round of presidential elections there. Could we maybe start by highlighting what we expect from Milei and his victory, and then also any other um, areas of risk or disruption, or maybe opportunity that come from the policy space for companies as they look at next year's plans?
Yeah, absolutely. There's certainly a lot going on in the region over the next 18 or so months. To start with Argentina, we got the results in last night for the second round of the presidential election. As we expected, Javier Milei, who is the sort of outsider libertarian candidate, won the election. He's slated to become Argentina's next president. And I think that's going to certainly lead us to a point where conditions are likely to shift quite dramatically from a political standpoint in Argentina. I think a couple of factors to keep in mind is the fact that the Milei administration is unlikely to have enough legislative support to really pursue some of the more sort of out there measures that have been proposed, including the idea of dollarizing in 2024. We think that's highly unlikely. But I think we will absolutely see a very different administration from what we've been used to seeing over the past 4 years.
And what other areas would you spotlight in terms of political risk for corporate planning?
Sorry. So I would say two markets that we're watching very closely right now are Guatemala and Panama, where we've seen social unrest break out recently. In Guatemala, we're likely to see a pretty rocky presidential transition after the recently elected president to be has had a bit of a tough time sort of being able to really step into the role. So that's something that we're monitoring quite closely. I would say the other big thing to watch in terms of elections is Mexico's election next year. Mexico will hold presidential elections in June. We're not expecting huge disruption in that regard. We are anticipating policy continuity. The ruling party Morena is likely to win this next election as well. But certainly we should see some interesting developments stemming from the new potential president of Mexico, likely to be Claudia Sheinbaum, potentially Mexico's first female president. So we're certainly watching that closely. And I would say things have settled down a little bit, both in Colombia and Peru, but I would still highlight them as potential spots of likely disruption in 2024, particularly Peru, where we've had in recent years a great deal of presidential transitions. It seems like this current administration, the Dina Boluarte administration, will be able to finish its term. But again, I think Peru is a country where things can change very rapidly. So I would definitely sort of keep a close eye on political developments there.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for joining us, Mariana. I think a lot to watch for in LATAM, but also clearly a number of opportunities for multinationals from an investment perspective. I appreciate your insights. We'll keep an eye on the region, given all the opportunities and complexity there. And thank you to all of our viewers. Looking forward to connecting with you next month for our next edition of GlobalView.